Hi, I'm Romy Hill, and this is the first of a series of videos going over my Swoop Softly cardigan pattern. Today is the cast-on and short row panels in the back. The pattern starts with Judy's magic cast-on to the right of center back. It's used as a provisional cast-on, and the left side of the back is worked first with its short row panels. To estimate the length of tail you'll need for Judy's magic cast-on, wrap your needle 10 times with your working yarn and measure. Using the length of yarn, estimate how much you'll need for the number of stitches that you need to cast on. Once you have your length of tail, put your yarn over the top of one needle and hold both needles side by side to begin. Use two same-size circulars and hold your yarn as a slingshot. Yarn on the finger will always go to the bottom needle, and yarn on the thumb will always go to the top needle. Alternate needles as you cast on the full amount of stitches to both needles. At the end of the cast on, the stitches on one needle will be worked and the stitches on the other needle will be saved for later. A good way to remember the motion of this cast on is to think about how your stitches are mounted on the needle. They're always going to have the right leg in front and the left leg in back. I like to stick on markers every 10 stitches on both needles to make sure that I don't forget where I am. Continue on alternating needles until all of your stitches have been cast on to both needles. Because the cast on was in C1, but the first row will be worked in C2, I'm going to tie a little knot, just a single knot, to keep the stitches from falling off the needles. And to keep that from falling off, I'm just going to put a little bow in there, and that's going to come out when I start working with C1 again. Judy's magic cast-on leaves a purl ridge on one side, so this is going to be the right side of the sweater so that it will blend in perfectly with the garter stitch. I've pulled the stitches that I'm holding onto my cable on the bottom, and I'm just going to be working the stitches on the top needle. This is the first row of short row section 1. It's worked entirely in color 2, as is short row section 2. As this row is worked, any markers that were placed during cast on are removed, and markers as specified in the first row of short row section 1 are added. Speeding things up a bit here just so you won't have to watch this in slow motion. Don't you wish you could do this in real life? Since I'm a continental knitter, I'm just going to show this last part of the row in English style so I can show you the edge stitches being worked through the back loop. This twists the stitches because my stitches are mounted with a right leg in front and the left leg in back, and it gives a nice tidy edge to the bottom of the sweater without having to slip any stitches. Row 2 has those two edge stitches knit through the back loop and then knit across to the farthest marker. Slip that farthest marker and then knit one stitch. This is going to become a German short row, so you're going to turn your work and slip that first stitch. Now bring the working yarn over the top of the needle so that it pulls the stitch over to the other side and it becomes slightly deformed. It looks like a double stitch with a little join in the middle. Slip that marker, and now we're going to start patterning. So this is going to be a knit 2 together, yarn over, knit 2 together, yarn over. And there are 10 of those knit 2 together yarn overs in each section until you get to the very end. And here we have it in English style for you. The yarn over looks a little bit different in English style, so I wanted to make sure that you could see what it looks like here. And this is row 3 of the short row section. We're right at the end here. And this end section only has 10 stitches, so there are 4 knit 2 together yarn overs, and then there are the 2 knit through the back loop at the very edge. Most of row 4 is going to be purled rather than knitted, except for those 2 edge stitches. And we're going to purl all the way to the second farthest marker from the edge. The short row in row 4 is a wrap and turn short row done on a yarn over. With yarn in front, slip the yarn over to the right needle and bring yarn to the back. Slip the yarn over back to the left needle and turn the work. Bring the working yarn to the back and in place to work row 5. Wrapping the yarn over preserves the look of the yarn over and makes a smoother pattern transition. On this row, the next 2 markers will move 1 stitch to the left. Moving the markers preserves the patterning and the number of stitches in each section. You'll need to remove the marker to do that last knit 2 together of the section, and once you have done that, just replace the marker and keep knitting. Here's a little trick to make that faster. I'm going to knit 2 together around the stitch marker, so my needle goes through both stitches and knits them together, and then afterwards goes through the stitch marker. Row 6, we're going to knit those 2 edge stitches through the back loop and then purl to the second marker. Once you get to the marker, slip the marker and then purl 1, and then we're going to do another wrap and turn on the yarn over. So let's take a look at that in English style. With the yarn in front, slip that yarn over to the right needle and then bring the yarn to the back, slip the yarn over back onto the left needle and bring the yarn forward again. Now turn the work and you're set to work the other way on row 7. Stitch markers on row 7 are going to remain in the same places, so you're just going to keep that pattern going with the knit 2 together and the yarn over all the way until the end, and then we're just going to have that last knit 2 together and yarn over, and the 2 stitches on the end are knit through the back loop. And row 8 is very short. It's going to end in another wrapped yarn over. Row 9 is the only row that changes the stitch count, and it's going to add 1 stitch between the marker and the edge. That stitch is going to be decreased out in the very next row, so it's not going to stay on there very long. After completing row 9, you will now be able to see the entire wedge. All of the short rows have been finished, and the next row is going to go the entire length of the piece. Row 10 starts with 2 stitches knit through the back loop, and this is a knit row, so all of the stitches will be knit on this row. Knit 6 stitches, and now knit 2 together, and that is going to decrease that extra stitch. Lift the bar of yarn before the next stitch and place it on your left needle with the right leg in front and the left leg in back. Now knit 2 together. You will now have 10 stitches between the marker and the edge. Slip that marker and knit the 20 stitches to the next marker. Slip the next marker and put that bar of yarn in front of the next stitch up onto your left needle and knit 3 together. This is going to smooth out the transition between the short rows. Again, slip the yarn bar up onto your left needle and knit 16 stitches. Again, slip the bar of yarn up onto your left needle and knit 3 together. And once again, the yarn bar onto the left needle. Knit 2 stitches. Now just slip that marker and knit the 20 stitches to the next marker. Slip that marker, and this is going to bring you to the double stitch from the German short row. You're going to work that as one stitch. So insert your needle through the center so that you can see 2 strands of yarn on either side and just knit that stitch. Now knit till 2 stitches before the end, and those last 2 stitches are knit through the back loop. The first of 2 wedges of short row section 1 is now complete. There will be 1 ridge of garter stitch up at the top, and then as you look down to the bottom of the wide part of the wedge, you'll see a ridge of garter stitch on either side of the patterning. There are now 3 garter stitch stripes before the next wedge, and the next row is a C1 row, so that knot is going to come out in order to use the C1 as the next stripe. Bring the yarn up behind your C2 and begin to knit the next row. Don't forget the 2 stitches on the side that are knit through the back loop. Continue working, and each time you switch colors, bring the new color up behind the color that was just used. Be sure to keep that edge on the looser side. If you're having problems at all, you can give it a little bit of a tug to make sure that it's loose enough. At this point, 2 wedges of short row section 1 have been done, as well as the stripes that appear in between the short row wedges. The angle of the patterning rises up towards the center back of the sweater, and that one stripe of C2 is exactly right in the center of the back. The next short row wedge is short row section 2, and that is designed to mirror short row section 1 as you work away from the middle of the sweater towards the left. Short row section 2 begins just like short row section 1. If you're having any problems with that edge being too tight, you can add a yarn over at the beginning of the row as long as you drop it on the way back. Just don't forget, make sure to mark it some way. Or you can just give it a little bit of a tug to make sure that there's enough looseness on the side so that it doesn't bind. Row 2 of short row section 2 is knit much the same way as in short row section 1. You'll be knitting all the way to the farthest marker placed. Slip that farthest marker and knit 2. That second stitch will become a German short row. Turn the work, and with the yarn in front, slip the first stitch purlwise and pull the yarn over the top to create your double stitch. Now knit 1 and slip your marker, and you will now begin your patterning. So it's a yarn over and an SSK to mirror the other side. An SSK is slip as if to knit, slip as if to knit, slip both stitches back to the left needle and knit them together through the back loop, and then a yarn over. And now English style, slip as if to knit, slip as if to knit, slip those 2 stitches back to the left needle and knit 2 together through the back loop, and then a yarn over. Slipping the stitches knitwise, that is as if to knit, repositions the stitches so that you can do a left leaning decrease without twisting your stitches. And continue to the end of row 3. No stitch markers will have moved on this row. This completes short row section 2, row 3. Begin row 4 with 2 stitches knit through the back loop, and then purl until 1 stitch before the second farthest marker. Again, the yarn over will be wrapped and turned to create a short row. Wrap just the same as you did in short row section 1 and turn the work. The first stitch on the other side is a right lifted increase. Locate the purl bump below the first stitch on the left needle and pull the purl bump up onto your left needle. Knit the purl bump as a stitch and continue by using the next stitch as part of an SSK. Continue patterning, alternating SSKs and yarn overs. Note that on this row, stitch markers will move 1 stitch to the right. To easily move that stitch marker, just reach through your stitch and move the stitch marker over onto your right needle. There's no need to take it off your needle. Continue patterning. On the second stitch marker again, this is going to move 1 stitch to the right. Just as before, move your stitch marker through the stitch and onto your right needle, and then continue patterning to the end. Three stitches before the end, knit 2 together through the back loop, twisting that stitch, and then knit 1 through the back loop. Row 5 is complete. Begin row 6 of short row section 2 by knitting 2 stitches through the back loop and then purl to the second marker. Slip that marker and then wrap the yarn over and turn the work. On row 7, slip that first marker, and then the first stitch is going to be a right lifted increase or RLI. Slip the purl bump from the first stitch on the left needle onto the left needle and knit it as if it were a stitch. Then immediately use the next 2 stitches, including that origin stitch, for an SSK. Continue to pattern alternating SSKs and yarn overs. No stitch markers will move on this row. Row 7 is complete. Row 8 is a very short row. You're going to knit those 2 edge stitches through the back loop and then purl to 3 stitches before the marker. Note that my next stitch is not a yarn over, and this sometimes happens where stitch markers will migrate in and between stitches. So if this happens to you, make sure to count the number of stitches in between markers. They will all be 20 stitches between markers, except for that edge, which is 10 stitches. So in that case, I had 21 stitches between the other 2 markers, and I needed to work 1 more purl stitch. Now that I'm at the correct spot, I'm going to wrap and turn that yarn over and work row 9 to the end, and that again starts with a right lifted increase or RLI. Row 10 is worked across the entire width of the wedge. Start with 2 stitches worked through the back loop and then knit 4 stitches. Knit 2 together and then lift the yarn bar in between stitches and put it on your left needle. Knit 3, and then slip your marker. Knit the 20 stitches to the next marker. Slip that marker, knit 1, and then lift the yarn bar before the next stitch and place on your left needle. Knit 17 stitches. Knit 3 together. Now lift that yarn bar onto your left needle and knit that as a stitch. Slip your marker and now knit 20 stitches to the next marker. Slip the next marker and knit 1. The next stitch will be the double stitch from the German short row. Knit that as though it were one stitch, placing your needle through the center. Knit to 2 stitches from the end, and knit the 2 side stitches through the back loop to twist them. Short row section 2 is now complete, and that leaves 2 sections of short row section 1 and 1 section of short row section 2. Work 1 more section of stripes and then another section of short row section 2, and the middle of the back is completed. The next row is a C1 row, and that is going to begin the shoulder shaping. Knit your first row as just a plain stripe row, and if you like, you can remove your markers now, although when I was knitting this, I left them in so I could keep better track of my stitches. Row 2 begins just like a plain stripe row as well. The only shaping is going to be almost completely to the end of the row, 4 stitches before the end. Four stitches before the end, knit 2 stitches together to decrease 1 stitch, and then knit the 2 edge stitches through the back loop. I like to mark all of my decrease rows with a pin so I can tell at a glance how many decreases I've done and make sure that I don't do too many or too few. And that concludes this video. You now have the middle back section of your Swoop Softly done, and you're well on your way to shoulder shaping. Make sure to join me again for more videos. Thank you for watching. Subscribe to my channel to be notified when the next video comes out.